We spoke a lot about blockchain as the backbone technology of supply chain management systems during episode 173 of the podcast, and we received some good feedback on that. But it's very true that most people think of cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin and others when they hear the term blockchain. And it's true. Cryptocurrencies and digital currencies, which are two separate but very related ideas, by the way, folks, both use blockchain. And the whole thing becomes a big mess because by and large, the coverage of these topics in the general media, it's so general that the distinctions often become blurred. So in our tireless effort to bring you, the FTR audience, relevant and timely fastener-related content, I set out to locate someone who could help us to understand a very practical aspect of all of this, and that is how fastener distributors can set themselves up to accept and use cryptocurrencies in their business. You hear about this more and more often. As often happens, a longtime friend of mine has a friend who knows all about this. He's Bill Ulivieri. He's co-founder of Senecal Capital Management. Now, they do several things, but one of them is bridging the gap between traditional investing and digital assets. You'll get the idea why in a second, folks. He's also the host of the Blockchain Advisor podcast, which is available on Spotify. Now, he came into this world after a long career in the more conventional world of commodities trading, and he joins us now. Bill, thanks for being here today.
Eric, thank you so much for having me. It's a real pleasure.
Oh, believe me, we've been needing a guy like you for quite a while. We're all confused about this.
Well, everything new is a little confusing, is that you work up the learning curve. It can be steep for every subject that we get involved with.
Well, folks, you heard the intro to all this. Just to give a little more background, when I got on this trail, I invited Bill to participate with me in a Zoom call that we put on last week. And we were talking to a group of people who are not fastener people, but they're just generally interested in preserving their assets in these tumultuous times. And so I got a good feel for how Bill speaks. And I thought, geez, it's going to be very appropriate for the FTR audience. So during our get to know each other phase, Bill, I was very pleasantly surprised that you have a fastener background, a small one, but nevertheless, you know the industry a little bit, don't you?
I do. My grandfather owned a cash register repair business. So we always come from a manufacturing and metal business. My dad started his personal business as a side gig in the 1960s. He started an automatic screw machine shop using a Sears credit card in the late 1960s. And he worked two jobs. He worked at a company called Teletype, which was a subsidiary of Bell & Howell, in the machine shop area in what was called T1, using Brown and Sharp and Harding machines. And then he realized he didn't want to be, the guy that retires at age 62 with a gold watch. And he wanted to always be an entrepreneur. So he started his own business, again, in the late 60s, using the Sears credit card. And it finally became a family-run business where my mom was the accountant in bookkeeping. I would clean up the oil dry and sweep it up off the floor, as well as stock the 10-foot metal bars into the screw machines. And as a child, my mom would pick me up from grammar school, and she would, at 3:30, and we would go over to my dad's shop where I would take a quick nap on a shelving unit, right, for about 45 minutes, and then get up and get back to work. And we would all head home around 8 o'clock, and my dad would then work the midnight shift at Teletype. So it's definitely a blue-collar family, a lot of metal. We love metal. I mean, end of story. I remember my dad making fun of the Picasso, that statue that was fabricated out of Core 10 in Chicago, the famous Picasso statue in Daly Center. My dad shouted at the TV, saying it was a huge waste of good metal. So, definitely come from a metal background.
Right. A lot of people in the Chicagoland area felt like that was a big eyesore, and probably still do. But yeah, that's a great story. We've heard other similar stories on the podcast of family businesses just growing from very humble beginnings. But in your case, you decided that you wanted to do something different, which led you into the world of trading and now doing what you do here, which is advising people about investments and assets in general. And of course, in the modern day, that means the world of cryptos, and you have a vast knowledge of digital currencies and related subjects. So here we are. I threw it out before, but what we really want to zero in on this time, Bill, is how distributors can get themselves well positioned to be ready to either accept or use cryptos or digital currencies in their business.
Sure, Eric. Well, and again, we'll have the flexibility to hop either to the Bitcoin cryptocurrency side or the stable coin, which acts more like a money market fund or US dollar. And so primarily, this is, I think, a really helpful conversation for small business owners because they have the flexibility of initiating and making decisions very quickly. And so primarily what a small business owner wants to do is make sure that they separate their personal cryptocurrency belongings and holdings from the ones that their business can hold. And why would a business want to accept cryptocurrency? Why would a business want to accept Bitcoin? And the prevailing theme is this. If you have a checking account or a bank account that has tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of dollars sitting in an account earning basically zero, how do we protect ourselves against the ravages of inflation eating away at that checking account? Inflation is easily 7% annually and projected to be double that. So we're losing purchasing power. We're not really being good and faithful stewards of the cash management component of our business. And also we have to ask ourselves, is there a way to better direct those assets to benefit the company? So I've been suggesting to firms, and we do it here, and that is to open up, if I could just drop a name, Eric, that would be to open up a Coinbase Commerce business account. Coinbase is by far way ahead of the game in terms of meeting the needs and supporting small business owners and institutional players. It would permit a business owner to open up a commercial bank account and do several things. One is it would allow you to have one more format to manage your bank account, your deposits. You can receive payment for services and goods using PayPal or debit cards. And you could also simultaneously receive one of seven or up to seven cryptocurrencies, Bitcoin, Ethereum, and 5 other cryptocurrencies in payment for goods and services. So it's a very versatile platform and they're business friendly. So I think for most people in the small business community who are looking for an appropriate KYC, which is know your client, an AML, anti-money laundering structure, like a legitimate bank, Coinbase is really the closest thing that I've been able to find that makes it easy for small business owners to, again, beginning to accept Bitcoin as an asset for payment of services. Or you can actually receive, in essence, what's digital US dollars. So you don't have to have and worry about the volatility and the fluctuations of Bitcoin on a minute-by-minute basis.
Yeah, it's important that you made that distinction. We're not now talking about speculating or so-called investing in Bitcoin or any cryptos right now. We're purely looking at the mechanics of how you would go about trading in that commodity because it's becoming more and more common.
This is becoming common also, Eric, because of what's been going on overseas in the Russian-Ukrainian conflict. I have a friend who's in I don't want to say heating and air conditioning, but he's in the efficient energy business. And for him, he has a client in Amsterdam that is having difficulty making wire transfer payments and ACH payments just in Amsterdam for his consulting services. So it would make it very, very easy using the convenience of your smartphone to quickly and easily make a Bitcoin payment overseas in a matter of a few minutes. Or again, you can send something that's very similar to a US dollar denominated in the number one, like a money market fund or a checking account. Amsterdam gentleman could send $1,000 and my friend who owns this business could receive it in a matter of seconds. And again, credited in his Coinbase account, which is then linked to another checking account, your primary business account. So Coinbase would be that a platform that would stand in between your company and your current bank account relationship with your banker.
Right, got it. So now let's say I'm your typical fastener company. Say I'm Parker Fasteners or BTM Manufacturing, and I've got a customer who wants to make an order, but they want to pay me for whatever reason using Bitcoin. basic question. How do I know what even to charge them? Where do I look to see what the transfer even is?
Well, you would begin once you open up your Coinbase account, once you have a method that can receive Bitcoin, the application on your phone or on your desktop application makes the conversion automatically. So you'll know exactly how many US dollars in Bitcoin you'll receive. So there's always an internal conversation going on inside your head. People in the United States, when they open up their app, their Bitcoin will be denominated in US dollars. It's $38,421 per Bitcoin. If you're in the EU, your program automatically converts it into EU. If you're in Amsterdam or South Africa, no matter where you are internationally, whoever's sending you that money will make that conversion internally to send you the US dollar value of Bitcoin or the EU amount of Bitcoin. So Bitcoin really is like this universal global currency, but the conversion is still made locally on your smartphone app or on your desktop. So that's the easiest part of the whole thing, is to say, this fastener job I have shipped to you was worth $52,128, right? $52,128. You would send them an invoice using QuickBooks, right, for that same amount. And on your QuickBooks invoice could be your Bitcoin address, the account number, so to speak, in order for you to receive that money. It's very simple, Eric, to be honest with you, but it does take a little getting used to get your first one done.
Well, anybody from the Stone Age like me who's been to an airport in another country and you walk in with a pile of U.S. money and you go up and you want to get some local currency, let's say you're in Argentina in the 90s like I was, and you wanted to buy a pocket full of Australes. Well, you could do that, but there was always an exchange rate, and you never really quite felt comfortable about what you're, at least I never did. I always felt like I was getting rolled. So how do you know what you're doing in that regard with an operator like Coinbase, or are they just pretty much the only game in town, so you take what you get?
I'm not going to say it's the only game in town, Eric. I'm just saying that I'm totally sensitive to the bid-ask spread when you look at foreign currencies, whether you're buying or selling them. Same experience as you. I landed at Heathrow Airport and was shocked to see what my US dollars would get in British pounds at the time. So basically, if you think of Bitcoin as a global currency, there kind of is no bid-ask spread as wide as your local bank or currency dealer. It's very, very, very tight. Now, Coinbase will charge a small processing fee, much like a brokerage fee. But the fees are very, very nominal. And again, you don't have to send Bitcoin. You can send USDC, US dollar. You can send, again, like I said, there's 7 cryptocurrencies that Coinbase accepts. But if you wanted Bitcoin, there'll be a small transaction fee, maybe $10 or $12 to send the Bitcoin. But the bid-ask spread that Coinbase uses, in my opinion, is very, very reasonable. It's not a usurious amount of spread width. And, Bitcoin does have its own volatility issues. But let me just also say, for those people that are a little bit more tech savvy and not in the Stone Age, there are other apps you can download and open and put in your company name, which actually allow you to send US dollars using the Bitcoin computer network. So Bitcoin is comprised of 2 parts. It's the payment rails, much like PayPal or the SWIFT system, and then it's the currency and the asset that goes on top of that. And maybe that's for another longer podcast. But again, for small business owners, open up a Coinbase commercial checking account, link it to your large bank like Chase or BMO Harris or whoever you use for traditional banking, your business account. Once you've done that, receiving Bitcoin, booking it as income, receiving Bitcoin for goods and services, that is it. It's easy peasy. It really is.
Okay, so a lot of people are thinking, well, these Bitcoins, they trade anywhere between, 35,000 a coin to 60,000 a coin, and they may go way higher. They've been a lot lower. Who knows what will happen? But the point is, fractional Bitcoins exist, right? So a lot of people don't own even one whole Bitcoin. They own $200 worth, and that's some fraction of a Bitcoin. So that's a big part of it, isn't it?
Yes. So Bitcoin, just like the US dollar, the minimum amount you can send of dollars basically is a penny, 0.01. In Bitcoin, the smallest amount goes 8 decimal places to the right of the decimal point. So theoretically, you could send $1, $10, $5, depending on the application you use, anywhere in the globe almost instantaneously for virtually no fee. So again, this makes it ideal for small business owners who want to send money, again, anywhere in the globe. And it just kind of depends on how savvy you would consider yourself, how much patience you would have getting started, because it still is very new technology, not unlike the internet back in the mid-1990s, where setting up an email account or an AOL account was a little bit quirky. I remember my mom being highly resistant to getting an email account at AOL because she wanted to know what I had to say that was so important. I just couldn't mail her a regular letter. A few years later, I should say 10 years later, 15 years later, she had an Apple tablet on her treadmill FaceTiming my grandchildren. And my mom was 88 years old at the time. So it starts slow and then goes fast. And this is going to be no different. So I would encourage business owners who are having potentially, or who suspect, who believe that there might be a problem sending money around the world. Bitcoin and that network is a very viable alternative and something I would suggest that they have at least get started with.
Well, right. That's a great point. I mean, the impetus behind an idea to do this is a whole nother conversation, but there are a lot of reasons. And there are also a lot of reasons to, even though we can't know the volatility of it, we can know that the infrastructure supporting it is very, very likely to survive whatever disasters befall us in the future. You sent me some information on that recently, Bill, and I do appreciate it because my eyes were opened.
Sure. Well, we also have to remember that the banks are primarily closed from Friday at 3 o'clock until Monday morning at 8 or 9 a.m. So every week, 52 weeks a year, the banks are closed for about 60 hours, 6-0. And so Bitcoin, again, the Bitcoin network is open 24/7, 365. It's never closed for holidays. There's no bank holidays. There's no ATM going down. You can send value in payment 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, again, for virtually zero cost and almost instantaneously. And I think that it's the future of money. It really is. Despite everything you hear about going on in legislation or the nefarious actions going on with Bitcoin, the truth is banks are moving in this direction. There's no doubt about it. Visa and MasterCard are moving there. PayPal, you may not hear about it very often in the news, but I guarantee you the banking system is already looking at this because they can save 80% of their costs of wire transferring money. And so the future's already here. You just don't know it yet.
Yeah. Can you believe it? The mainstream media outlets are not keeping us advised. Well, hard to believe, but true. Bill, you're doing a great service, I think, to a lot of listeners. And I want to add, I don't think we're going to get during this conversation to one of the points, and that is making the distinction between the digital currencies, the cryptos, and so forth. I want to point out to everybody something I've mentioned on previous episodes, and that is a great podcast you should listen to get a very thorough overview of this topic. It's episode 328 of the Corbett Report. The title of that episode was The Bitcoin PSYOP. Again, that's the Corbett Report, episode 328. Don't miss that to get more clarity on that. I'm going to ask you one esoteric question about the mechanics of all this, and then I want to ask you a little bit about this executive order that just hit the headlines. Apparently, there's more than one blockchain that all of these transactions happen on, and at some level, you have the option of selecting one. Is that true? And if so, how do you make a decision like that?
The answer, it is true. There's one internet network, but the internet network consists of HTTPS, which is the secure hypertext. It's the email protocol. It's FTP when you're sending files along the internet. So there's the internet backbone, and then there's all the protocols that exist underneath that. And I'm sure there's dozens of protocols that we all use when we're sending email or MP3 files or WAV files. So it's all a little bit different. And yes, in blockchain, there is the Ethereum network. There's the Bitcoin network. There's the XRP Ripple network. These are all protocols. These are all communication languages that use the internet to send and receive messages and value. I don't really think that small business owners need to get bogged down in the nuances of which network protocol they're using. But you're going to just take my word for it that the biggest, strongest, most secure network is the traditional Bitcoin network. It's not Bitcoin Cash. It's not Bitcoin Silver. It's not the iterations and tangential tokens like Litecoin or Dogecoin, although you can use those. I'm just saying the cryptocurrency network and the one that has all the first mover adoption, it's like the General Motors. It's the big one, right? This the S&P 500 of digital assets. That is the traditional Bitcoin network. So I would focus my time there. And I'll tell you another reason why. And that is Bitcoin is the only, I shouldn't say only, Bitcoin is treated as intangible property by the Internal Revenue Service. The U.S. accounting rules suggest that Bitcoin is an intangible asset. The IRS treats it as property. You can't really say that with other cryptocurrencies and other networks. So is it a security? Well, the SEC hasn't really said yet, but Bitcoin is still treated as an outbuilding or a piece of property, a barn or real estate investment trust. So there are some taxable preferential treatments to Bitcoin that users should probably be aware of. You're still going to be liable for capital gains whenever you sell whatever Bitcoin you receive. And I also want to mention that Bitcoin traditionally has grown around 120% annually as a piece of property. So this is why it's important, or this is why large businesses are holding Bitcoin on their balance sheets, because it helps them offset what could be the 7% erosion of inflation. So you can't really offer those guarantees with other cryptocurrencies, but with Bitcoin has a lot of street cred, so to speak. And there's a lot of potentials, both practically and tax-wise, that make Bitcoin a more viable option for small business owners.
Well, I got more than I bargained for on that one. Thanks, Bill. But I just wanted to circle back to the question again. So even if we're just talking about Bitcoin, that rides on one and one only blockchain. There aren't several of them supporting the same network. Is that what you're saying?
I'm saying that, so there are 3 or 4 different versions of Bitcoin. Each uses its own set of rules. So it uses the internet, but it doesn't channel the transactions the same way. It doesn't protect the network. They are different networks, but they're very, very, very similar. It's the Bitcoin Cash network. It's the Bitcoin network. It's the Bitcoin Silver network. So it sounds the same, but they're very different cryptocurrencies, Eric. I think I'm answering your question correctly.
Okay. Well, we'll leave it there. I think you are also, and I may just be overcomplicating it because I'm just getting into it. But thanks for your comments on that. So I'll jump over to this executive order. We had this hit the headlines the other day when we were doing our Zoom conference, and you really hadn't gotten up to speed on it. Do you have a quick take on what that might mean? Because it seems, again, to conflate this idea of crypto and digital currency, which the Fed is threatening to unleash. And by the way, folks, the yuan over in China has already gone digital. So they're ahead of us in that department. I'm not saying it's a good thing, but there's an area where they beat us to the punch. Comments from you, Bill?
I was frightened had a lot of anxiety before the executive order came out. But my take on it is that the executive order doesn't take any direct action or ban to curtail the use of cryptocurrency. It does not establish any new regulatory governmental bodies, which is good. It does not formally institute a central bank digital currency, but there is just no way we're not going to go down this road. It does acknowledge that crypto is tied between. It's very important that we don't lose this industry based on giving us financial strength and technological leadership around the world. So the executive order does recognize the incredible futuristic potential to our GDP. It does direct the U.S. government to support technology in the use of digital currencies and to continue researching into a central bank digital currency. So it doesn't do anything to hurt us. It was kind of underwhelming. And honestly, I think the executive order, I would say, was even welcomed by those in the cryptocurrency industry because we have no clarity from the government. We are regulated by the SEC, Securities and Exchange Commission. Is it a CFTC, Commodity Futures Trading Commission? Is it the Department of Justice, the U.S. Treasury? Who's responsible for giving us clarity and direction on how we can roll out and build a distributed, decentralized blockchain technology for the United States and not get financially devastated with a fine from a regulatory body. So I'm not worried about the executive order. I think it was a complete non-event in many cases. It does recognize American competitiveness in this space. Countries like Portugal and Singapore are clearly offering tax incentives and tax breaks. El Salvador is accepting and offering tax breaks to get citizenship down in Latin America. So it sees the future. It's trying not to diminish America's ability to take advantage of it, yet try to find some kind of regulatory framework that we can operate inside without getting in trouble.
Yeah, it reminds me a little bit about the early days of e-commerce where there was this uncomfortable ambiguity about how all that taxation was going to take place in the regulation. You knew it was coming, but you didn't know where it would set in. And I guess it's still not resolved, but that makes a lot of sense. Well, Bill, you do a lot to bridge the gap between traditional investing and digital assets. Let everybody know how they can get in touch with you if they'd like to get more info on you.
Oh, that would be great, Eric. Well, you can call our office at area code 847-686-4800, or you can text the word blockchain to the number 22828. That's blockchain to 22828 if you'd like to begin subscribing to our blockchain advisor newsletter. So it just kind of depends on the conversation that somebody would like to have. If you're only interested in blockchain and learning about it, the podcast might be a good fit. But if you're interested in learning how to incorporate digital assets in your overall business, or even personally in the investing side in 401k or IRA, that would be best to call our office and get in touch with me or leave a message.
And again, that's Senecal Capital Management. Bill also hosts the Blockchain Advisor podcast on Spotify. I hope you'll come back in the near future, Bill, and help us along with this, because I know a few questions are going to pour in. I got to jump in a bigger way. And you've got a lot on the ball in that department. Thank you.
Anytime you would like to have me on, I'll drop everything, Eric. I love talking about Bitcoin and blockchain technology. It is the future. And there's a lot of exciting potential, especially in this highly inflationary environment.
We've been speaking with Bill Ulivieri, and this is Fully Threaded Radio.